What if I told you that the secret to curing a lifetime of just crippling clinical anxiety wasn't found in a therapist's office
Yeah.
or, through heavy pharmaceuticals,
Right.
but actually by taking a microdose of a blue dye that was originally used to treat malaria?
Hmm.
I mean, today, we are completely rewriting the rules of biological aging.
Yeah, it really sounds like science fiction at first, but it's deeply rooted in how our cells generate power. We are looking at a biological landscape right now that is much more like reprogramming a supercomputer
Yeah.
rather than that old, Newtonian model of just pushing a massive boulder up a hill and hoping you lose weight.
Right, exactly. And if you are listening to this right now, I know exactly who you are. You're someone who wants to be thoroughly well-informed without, drowning in information overload. You want the real science, you want to understand the mechanisms, but you don't want the superficial fluff.
Huh?
So today, this deep dive is designed specifically for you.
We have this truly fascinating stack of research in front of us today on modern protocols for cellular vitality and longevity. And the goal here isn't just to talk about adding a few, arbitrary years to your life.
No.
We're talking about fundamentally upgrading how your body functions at the absolute microscopic level, step by step.
Okay, let's unpack this because we're going on a serious journey today. We're going to start at the absolute baseline, literally how your cells create energy. And we are going to work our way all the way up to building macroscopic physical armor as we age.
It's a full system upgrade.
Exactly. We're pulling out the most surprising, actionable insights from these sources.
Yeah.
But to start, we really have to talk about the power grid. Because before we can optimize the body or clean it up or build muscle, the power actually has to be turned on.
Right. It is the absolute prerequisite for everything else. You cannot force a biological system to heal if it literally lacks the energy currency to run the repair protocols.
It makes sense.
And this is where the research from Dr. Scott Scher and Natalie Needham becomes incredibly relevant because they point out a staggering statistic, which is that only about 6% of the U.S. adult population is metabolically healthy.
Wait, just 6%?
Just 6%, yeah.
That means 94% of people are walking around with a fundamentally broken power grid.
Precisely. I mean, the vast majority of people are suffering from mitochondrial dysregulation. Their microscopic power plants are basically sputtering.
Right.
And when we say sputtering, we mean the electron transport chain inside the cell. The actual assembly line that makes energy is physically breaking down.
Wow.
When that happens, the cells sense this severe lack of energy coupled with an abundance of stress, and they enter what is known as a cell danger response. They literally lock the doors. And this leads to people getting trapped in what the sources call the sympathetic spiral of doom.
Which, I mean, that sounds like a terrifying carnival ride.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's a chronic state of fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
And the natural instinct for someone who feels burned out and highly anxious is to aggressively try to fix it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They attempt intense multi-day fasting, or they force themselves into aggressive breath work or ice baths, basically trying to mandate their nervous system to calm down.
Exactly. But it often causes these severe physiological crashes.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about the underlying mechanism. Trying to force your nervous system to calm down through aggressive detoxes or extreme stressors when you're already in profound burnout, it is like trying to install a massive iOS software update on a phone that only has 1% battery.
Right.
It's just going to crash.
Yeah.
You simply don't have the juice to run the installation.
That is a perfect analogy. You really cannot calm anxiety without sufficient cellular energy, or ATP. And this brings us back to that malaria dye you mentioned in the intro, which is low-dose methylene blue.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're talking about the range of 4 to 25 milligrams.
Let me stop you right there because I have to push back on this a bit. Methylene blue is famously used to clean fish tanks and dye fabrics. It literally turns your tongue bright blue. You are telling me people are intentionally ingesting this to fix their mitochondria. How on earth is that safe?
Well, it's highly purified pharmaceutical grade, of course. Nobody should be drinking fish tank cleaner.
Okay, good disclaimer.
But microscopically, it is a metabolic lifesaver. There is a specific case study in our sources about a patient who had suffered from severe, crippling anxiety their entire life. They tried everything: SSRIs, neurofeedback, trying to psychologically force the nervous system to relax.
Nothing worked.
Nothing worked. But once they started working with a practitioner and taking low-dose methylene blue, their anxiety just vanished. Not because it was a chemical sedative, but because their cells finally gained the physical energy required to exit that fight-or-flight state.
So the cells finally had the battery power to feel safe. How does a blue dye actually do that inside the cell?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, methylene blue has a unique molecular structure that allows it to act as an alternate electron carrier inside the mitochondria. If your cellular assembly line is broken, methylene blue physically steps in and bridges the gap.
Just bypassing the damage.
Exactly. It donates electrons to keep the energy production going, bypassing the broken parts to produce ATP directly. And simultaneously, it acts as a targeted antioxidant, neutralizing reactive oxygen species or free radicals right at the source. It provides a smooth energy lift, allowing the body to handle stressors without crashing.
That completely flips the script on how we view anxiety. Step one, just plug the phone in, give the cells energy. But having cellular energy isn't the whole puzzle, because you have all this new cellular energy, but your brain still thinks you're being chased by a predator. You just have a highly energized panic attack.
Yes.
The energy is wasted. We have to steer that energy and physically pull the nervous system out of its survival state.
Right. Energy is the fuel, but the nervous system is the steering wheel. And according to experts like Dr. Carrie Jones, Cynthia Thurlow, and Dr. Nawaz Habib, chronic, unpredictable stress hyperactivates the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center.
Right.
This can throw the body into that sympathetic fight-or-flight panic, but often, if the stress goes on long enough, it pushes the body all the way into a parasympathetic freeze state, a total systemic shutdown.
And to figure out how to snap out of that freeze, our research relies on an AI analysis tool called Open Evidence. It essentially scanned major medical journals to find the most scientifically validated ways to pull someone out of this vagal shutdown. And surprisingly, the top interventions were not heavy pharmaceuticals.
Not at all.
They were mechanical physical actions. Things like 360-degree diaphragmatic rib breathing, splashing ice or cold water directly on your face, and forceful vocalization, like loud humming or gargling water.
The case study from Dr. Carrie Jones illustrates the power of this beautifully. She consulted on a patient who was entirely shut down, burned out, anxious, depressed, practically catatonic from stress.
Wow.
Rather than escalating to heavy psychiatric medications, she had this patient start with these free, highly specific vagus nerve exercises, and that is what finally got the healing ball rolling.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because on the surface, the sheer absurdity of this is hilarious. You have someone enduring a profound existential crisis. Their amygdala is screaming that the world is ending, and the scientifically validated cure is to go to the kitchen sink and gargle some tap water. It sounds ridiculous.
It sounds absurd until you look at the physical anatomy. The vagus nerve is the primary information highway between your brain and your internal organs. It controls your heart rate, your digestion, everything. These mechanical hacks directly vibrate that nerve. By physically vibrating your vocal cords through gargling or deep humming, or triggering the mammalian dive reflex with freezing water on the trigeminal nerve in your face, you are essentially bypassing the brain's psychological panic cycle entirely.
That's wild.
You are sending a hardwired mechanical electrical signal straight up into the brain stem that dictates we are physically safe.
So you aren't trying to think your way out of a panic attack. You are mechanically acting your way out of it.
Exactly. And the long-term longevity impact of this is profound. By instantly shifting out of panic, you lower your chronic cortisol output. When cortisol is chronically high, it actually degrades the mucosal lining of your intestines, causing leaky gut and systemic inflammation. Stopping that cortisol drip halts the accelerated aging process in its tracks.
That is a brilliant transition point, because now the alarm bells are finally off. We've recharged the battery with methylene blue. We've gargled our water and used cold exposure to mechanically force the nervous system into a safe state.
Right.
The energy is flowing and the body feels secure, which means it is finally biologically safe to clean up the wreckage.
Yeah.
We are talking about autophagy.
Yes. Autophagy is fundamentally a cellular cleanup process, and a major focal point in our research here is Dave Asprey, who famously has the stated goal of living to 180 years old.
That's ambitious.
Very. And he heavily references the Nobel Prize-winning research of Dr. Yoshinori Osumi on this topic.
For the listener, let's just translate what autophagy actually looks like under a microscope. It is basically an internal recycling plant. When triggered, it patrols your body, hunts down weak, sputtering mitochondria and damaged, misfolded proteins, and it literally digests them.
Yeah, it breaks them right down.
It breaks them down into raw amino acids and spare parts to build fresh, highly efficient cellular structures.
That is a highly accurate description, but the problem has historically been how we trigger that recycling plant to turn on. Usually, you need extreme multi-day fasting to convince the body it needs to start eating its own damaged proteins for fuel. But Asprey notes that fasting for days on end is simply not realistic for most people. Plus, extreme fasting is a massive stressor. It can easily push an already overwhelmed person right back into that cell danger response we just fixed.
Right. The body senses the starvation and goes, oh no, there is a famine, shut everything down. So how do we get the recycling plant to turn on without the biological panic of starvation?
The research highlights a specific compound called spermidine. Taking 1 to 3 milligrams of a natural spermidine extract daily, or eating foods rich in it, acts as a biological mimic. At a molecular level, spermidine tricks your cells into initiating the autophagy process without the severe calorie restriction.
Oh, wow.
It flips the cellular switch to reverse biological age without the starvation signal. And to supercharge it, the sources suggest combining this with REHIT, which is reduced exertion high-intensity interval training.
We should also mention the dietary source of this compound. There are populations in Nagano, Japan, who are among the longest-lived people on the planet. And they regularly eat something called natto, a fermented soybean dish that is incredibly high in natural spermidine.
Though it is worth noting that natto has a very distinct slimy texture and a pungent flavor that isn't for everyone.
Yeah, an acquired taste for sure.
Exactly, which is why the 1 to 3 milligram extracts have become a cornerstone in longevity protocols. By keeping the cellular house perfectly clean, you radically lower background systemic inflammation.
But keeping the general cellular house clean is only half the battle, because the general recycling plant can't cross the blood-brain barrier. The brain is a completely different ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right? Our sources highlight that the brain has its own unique, highly volatile security force. And if we don't manage it properly, it could literally turn on us.
You are referring to microglia. These are the brain's resident immune cells. And the research here from Dr. David Perlmutter and Dr. Li Huisai, a prominent neuroscientist at MIT, is arguably the most critical information in our entire deep dive today.
Let's get into the microglia because they essentially have a split personality.
They do. In a healthy environment, microglia exist in a nurturing state known as M2. They clean up debris, they support the neurons, they are the caretakers.
Okay, that sounds good.
But when they are exposed to systemic inflammation or poor metabolic health, they shift into a destructive state called M1. And M1 microglia are terrifying. They abandon their efficient mitochondria and rely on a primitive, dirty energy system called glycolysis.
Why does that matter? What makes glycolysis so bad for the brain?
Because glycolysis in this context is like burning dirty coal instead of solar power. It produces toxic inflammatory byproducts. This makes the M1 microglia highly aggressive. They act almost like an autoimmune disorder inside your skull. They literally mistake your healthy synapses for foreign pathogens and physically digest the connections that hold your memories together.
That is chilling. The immune cells that are supposed to protect your brain start destroying your cognitive function. So how do we stop that? How do we reprogram them back to caretakers?
The protocol is fascinating. It involves using a very specific frequency of light and sound 40 Hz therapy for about an hour a day. It also involves preemptively elevating ketones in the brain, perhaps using a ketone dial, and, crucially, maintaining impeccable dental hygiene.
So what does this all mean? I need to pause on that last one. Are you saying that forgetting to floss can literally cause my brain's immune cells to mutate and eat my synapses?
It is a direct causal pathway. The specific bacteria that cause gingivitis and periodontal disease are capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier.
Unbelievable.
When they enter the brain, the microglia sense the infection, immediately shift into that destructive M1 state to fight it, and start causing massive neuroinflammation in the crossfire.
Brush your teeth to save your brain. Good to know. But let's talk about the 40 Hz light, because the story in the sources about the woman in her 40s really drives this home. She was diagnosed with full-blown Alzheimer's in her early 40s, complicated by massive mold toxicity.
Right.
But by removing the toxins and using that 40 Hz light therapy, she made a full recovery.
Yeah.
How does a flashing light heal the brain?
This raises an important question about how we view neurodegenerative disease. Dr. Tsai's lab at MIT has shown that exposing the eyes and ears to 40 Hz frequencies physically entrains your brainwaves. It stimulates gamma oscillations.
What do those do?
These rhythmic electrical pulses literally act like a sweeping mechanism, flushing fluids through the brain to clear out amyloid plaques. Furthermore, when combined with a ketone diol, which is essentially a highly bioavailable direct liquid form of ketones that the brain can use as instant, clean fuel, the microglia drop that dirty glycolysis energy. They safely transition back to the supportive M2 state.
That is incredibly hopeful. We've saved the brain from itself. But the brain doesn't exist in a vacuum. It relies entirely on the nutrients delivered through the bloodstream. And the ultimate gatekeeper of that bloodstream, deciding what gets in and what stays out, is the gut. This brings us to a very famous bacteria right now called Akkermansia mucinifila.
Yes, Dr. William Lai and Sean Stevenson have provided some incredible insights into how the gut controls the blood supply. If you want to protect your metabolic system, you have to cultivate your Akkermansia. And you do that by feeding it specific compounds called polyphenols and ellagitannins.
Which you get from some really delicious foods, actually. Pomegranates, dried cranberries, Concord grapes, peach juice, chili peppers, and Chinese black vinegar. But what actually are ellagitannins, and why does this specific bacteria love them?
Ellagitannins are essentially tough, complex plant defense molecules. Most of our digestive enzymes can't even dent them. But Akkermansia is uniquely equipped with the specific enzymes required to break them down.
So it's like a specialist.
Exactly. When it digests these tough compounds, it produces a byproduct called butyrate. And this is where the magic happens. That butyrate triggers your gut lining to release a natural physiological puff of GLP-1.
GLP-1, the most famous acronym in medicine right now.
But we aren't talking about the pharmaceutical weight loss shots here.
Exactly. Dr. Lee explains that this is a natural physiological puff of GLP-1 generated entirely from food. Because nearly every blood vessel in your body has a GLP-1 receptor, this natural release does something remarkable.
What's that?
It repairs damaged blood vessels and actively inhibits angiogenesis, meaning it physically prunes away and stars the abnormal mutated blood vessels that tumors use to feed themselves.
I love Dr. Lee's distinction here. He frames the synthetic weekly GLP-1 injections as a sledgehammer. Yes, it works for weight loss, but because the dose is so unnaturally high and constant, it often causes extreme nausea and gastrointestinal paralysis. But the natural route, fueled by pomegranate and cranberry, acts like a smart pruning system. It only releases exactly what the body needs. And the data backing up the power of managing GLP-1 receptors is just staggering. Our sources include massive data presented at the American Society for Clinical Oncology involving 20,000 patients.
That's a huge study.
It is. They found that activating these GLP-1 pathways can reduce the spread of breast cancer by 50% and lung and colon cancer by 45%.
Like a 50% reduction in breast cancer metastasis just by managing this blood vessel pathway.
Yes, because it literally cuts off the blood supply to the microscopic tumors before they can grow. In the short term, this natural GLP-1 safely suppresses appetite and improves insulin sensitivity. But in the long term, it reduces the risk of heart attacks and strokes by 30% and drastically cuts the risk of cancer metastasis.
That is the ultimate biological hack. If we follow that logic to its conclusion, our internal ecosystem is now pristine. We have energized the cells with methylene blue. We've mechanically calmed the nervous system with vagal tone hacks. We've cleaned up the cellular junk with spermidine, protected the brain's synapses with 40 Hz light, and tuned the gut to starve tumors.
We've done the internal work.
But an optimized engine needs a fortified chassis to protect it from the elements as it ages. We have to build physical armor. And this brings us to muscle.
Muscle is far more than just for aesthetics. It is an active endocrine organ. And experts like Dr. Stacy Sims, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and Ben Greenfield are very clear on this. If you want to age well, you have to completely discard moderate walking as your sole form of exercise.
I'm going to challenge that for a second on behalf of everyone listening, because almost every public health guideline tells us, just take a nice moderate walk for 30 minutes a day and you'll age gracefully. Are you saying that is completely insufficient?
It is profoundly insufficient for preserving muscle mass and metabolic function. What's fascinating here is a biological concept called anabolic resistance. As we age, our muscles become increasingly deaf to the signals telling them to grow or even just maintain their size.
Ah, I see.
This is especially true for women losing estrogen during perimenopause. The body requires much, much louder signals to trigger muscle synthesis. A moderate walk is a biological whisper. You need to shout at the muscles.
And how exactly do we shout at them mechanically?
By lifting heavy weights. You need to lift weights heavy enough to cause actual muscle failure in the 8 to 12 rep range. And you need to incorporate sprint interval training like 30 seconds of all-out 110% effort on a bike or track.
Why does it have to be to failure? What is physically happening inside the tissue when we do that?
Well, under extreme heavy load, the protein filaments in your muscles, actin and myosin, are forced to grip tightly together to handle the mechanical tension. That specific, intense mechanical strain creates a central nervous system adaptation.
Right.
It physically stimulates and wakes up dormant muscle stem cells, called satellite cells. Aging and dropping hormones leave these stem cells asleep. Heavy resistance training violently wakes them up and forces them to fuse with the muscle fibers to make them stronger.
But waking them up isn't enough. You have to feed them properly once they're awake. The research shows that if you are over 40, you need about 40 grams of protein per meal. Because of that anabolic resistance, older adults require up to 68% more protein than young people just to achieve the exact same level of muscle protein synthesis.
Yes.
And you might even need to add digestive enzymes like protease or essential amino acids to make sure your aging gut actually breaks it down and absorbs it.
Exactly right. The Women's Health Initiative data backs this up beautifully. Women who prioritized heavy strength training survived and thrived at vastly higher rates into their 80s and 90s compared to those who just walked. Defending against osteoporosis, sarcopenia, and metabolic syndrome requires a highly resilient, physically demanding frame.
I absolutely have to bring up the story in our sources about Train with Joan.
Yeah.
This is an Instagram phenomenon that perfectly captures this. Joan was in her mid-60s, dealing with low bone density, carrying a lot of visceral fat, and her health was rapidly declining. She didn't start lifting weights until she was a senior citizen. And by age 73, she completely transformed her physiological reality. At 73 years old, she deadlifts 100 kilos, that's over 220 pounds, and she bench presses 55 kilos.
It is the perfect embodiment of everything we've discussed today. She didn't just slow down aging, she built the physical armor to defy it.
She really did.
Yeah.
And it flawlessly summarizes the journey we've taken today. You cannot build the 100-kilo deadlifting armor of someone like Joan unless you have first addressed those microscopic foundations. You have to give the cells the actual battery power with things like methylene blue.
Right.
You have to signal mechanical safety to the nervous system with vagal tone exercises so the body isn't locked in a frozen panic. You have to clean out the junk with autophagy, use light to protect the brain's immune cells from digesting your memories, and nurture the gut to starve out mutated blood vessels. Everything intimately connects. It is one brilliant continuous loop of vitality.
It requires a profound shift in perspective, though. We so often view aging as an inevitable decline, a strict one-way street of deterioration. But think about the mechanisms we've uncovered today. It's specific frequencies of light, gargling water at your bathroom sink, and eating the tough skin of a pomegranate can literally rewrite your cellular behavior and flip your biological switches from survival to repair. What other everyday environmental inputs are we entirely ignoring that are secretly controlling our biological clocks?
That is a wild thought to leave on. Every single input matters, right down to the microscopic level. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and keep upgrading.